The G20 summit opened in London today amidst widespread protests in the streets. British Prime Minister opened the talks, declaring there was a high degree of consensus on a recovery plan for the ailing global economy. World leaders are expected to impose new financial rules and come up with more funds for the IMF. Meanwhile, police in London are bracing for more protests a day after thousands of demonstrators jammed the streets of London's financial district. Most of the demonstrators were peaceful, but some skirmishes broke out as police tried to keep thousands in containment pens surrounding the Bank of England. A number of protesters smashed their way into the Royal Bank of Scotland and wrote "thieves" on the side of the walls of the bank. Demonstrators raised effigies of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, representing war, climate chaos, financial crimes, and homelessness. A small number of protesters played a giant game of Monopoly, armed with huge crates of fake money. One man involved with the protest died after collapsing in the street. Police said he was found unconscious near the Bank of England and was rushed to hospital, where he was pronounced dead. Up to 88 people were arrested Wednesday, with police mounting one of Britain's biggest security operations in years. Security is at the Excel Centre, where the G20 talks are being held. It's extremely tight, with police turning away anyone within a half-mile radius who doesn't have accreditation. We go right now to London to speak with the former British MP, Tony Benn, current president of the Stop the War Coalition. He spoke at a G20 protest in Trafalgar Square on Wednesday. Tony Benn, you were one of the longest reigning members of the British Parliament. You served over half a century before you left and became president of the Stop the War Coalition. Yet yesterday you were outside in the streets addressing the G20 protest. Why?
Well, I'm an old man. I'll be 84 tomorrow, and I've never been busier. I'm doing 7 or 8 public meetings all over the country every week. And yesterday we had a huge demonstration in Trafalgar Square. We marched from the American Embassy, where I gave a letter to President Barack Obama welcoming him in London and pointing out we had 3 big anxieties. One was the continuation of the war in Afghanistan, and secondly, the obvious crisis in relations between Israel and Palestine, because the new Israeli government says they're not in favor of a Palestinian state, and also expressing our anxiety about nuclear weapons, where some progressive moves have been made. But it was an amazing day, the last 2 days in London, because of the G20 summit. We had an audience worldwide for what we were saying, and I've never in my long life known a time when public opinion was so divided from government opinion. And I think that's happening not only in London, but all over the world.
Explain exactly what you mean by that.
Well, I think what's going on now is that the leaders of the world are trying to recreate as best they can by subsidy, the enormous subsidies, the system that has let us down. And we are facing a very, very serious crisis, and it's not just an economic crisis, it is a political crisis, a democratic crisis. I remember hearing from the United States people saying we want people to think about Main Street and not Wall Street, and that's a very vivid way of describing what people feel. Mass unemployment, foreclosures of people on their homes, which is a disgrace, money spent on war, which goes on and on. There's a threat to Iran now from the new Israeli government, and people say we are not prepared to accept it. I don't think these are protests, because a protest, you say, I've lost the battle and I don't like it. These are demands, and all progress is really made when people make demands upon the government. We will not accept war. We will not accept unemployment. And so that's the situation we're in. Now, Gordon Brown talks about a global structure to deal with a global crisis. Well, fine, but who will control the global crisis, the global structure? Will it be democratic, or will it be run by the banks and the multinational corporations? And so we've got a huge new perspective opening up, and I think it is a big democratic demand that is being made.
We're talking to Tony Benn. Is it true, Tony Benn, you were the longest-serving member of Parliament?
Well, I was the longest-serving Labour member of Parliament. I did 51 years in Parliament and 11 years in the Cabinet. And so I'm at my age, I've had a lot of experience And I don't want anyone to vote for me, and that is a freedom I never dreamed of. People listen because they say, well, at least he's not asking us to vote for him.
Tony Benn, explain what the war in Afghanistan, or Iraq for that matter, has to do right now with the G20, who are taking on these economic issues, this global economic meltdown.
Because, you see, one of the great dangers of an economic crisis is it can lead to war. I remember Hitler coming to power very well. There were 6 million unemployed in Germany, and Hitler said it's all due to the Jews and the communists and the trade unions. Give me power, said Hitler, and I will give you jobs. And he did. Half the unemployed he put in the arms factories, the other half he put in the German army, and we had another bloody war. And the two European wars from 1914 to 1945 in 31 years cost 105 million lives were lost in 2 wars, and that was not unconnected with the grave economic crisis in the 1930s.
Tony Benn, the issue of Main Street and Wall Street, who benefits, who controls where the money goes, how the money is lost, or who gets the most of what's there, how would it be controlled democratically? What is your alternative?
Well, you see, the United Nations was set up after the war, and the 5 permanent members have a veto. They were the victors in the last war. But if you look at a democratic world, if you look at drawing up a constitution for the world like the American Constitution, you've got to base it on population. And of course, China has 1.2 billion people, and they have the same vote at the United Nations as Luxembourg, with a population of a few 100,000. And then India has a population of 1.2 billion. So we're talking about something that's never really been contemplated before, that the world economy should be supervised by people we elect and we remove, and therefore act in our interests. And those who drafted the American Constitution are needed now, because we hold these truths to be self-evident. It's something that you've got to apply globally now. And it's very exciting. And you see, young people are so well aware of this. And I've just been talking at a conference of people in their 16, 17-year-old at a girls' school in London, a huge national conference. And when I look at them, I think my generation made a complete muck of the world. And here's a generation coming along that through the internet and Facebook and all that understand each other. They don't have the hostilities about religion or race. They just know that they've got to put the world at rights, or we will end up with a nuclear war that'll destroy everybody. I have huge confidence in the younger people. I've got 10 grandchildren, and I have confidence in them too.
I'd like you to stay on, Tony Benn.